Hello everyone, Mekkah here. Welcome back to another episode of WAIFU, where we analyze interesting Fire Emblem units. What else did you think it meant? In this series, I take a close look at units that I feel are underrated or overrated by the Fire Emblem community. So if there's any units you think I should take a look at, please post them down below, and while you're there, don't forget to recruit the like button by turning it blue. Today's waifu is going to be Ross, a training unit from the Sacred Stones. Now, a long time ago, I did a video on Sacred Stones promotion paths, and I disclosed my opinion on a certain trainee unit, and then I made a follow-up video about that particular trainee. If you're familiar with those, then you might think this is going to be like 10 minutes of Mekkah bashing a unit with low bases and no mounts, but Ross is much more interesting than that. There's a lot of fascinating little aspects to Ross that can teach us about Fire Emblem in general, such as the importance of base stats, promotion bonuses, growth rates and extra levels, as well as looking into what goes into choosing a promotion path, and how a training unit compares to regular units throughout the game. I actually used Ross in a lone turn count run for this channel, and he even sees use sometimes in 0% growth runs, so let's not count him out just yet. So, in case you've never taken a look at Ross, or it's been a while since you played the Sacred Stones, here's the rundown. Ross's first appearance is in Chapter 2 of the Sacred Stones, where he and his dad are fleeing from their village as it's about to be destroyed by a brigand. Ross gets hurt in the process, and it's up to the player to rescue him. He's an NPC that you can recruit by talking to him with Erica, although to get him close to each other you'll have to rescue Ross with Vanessa and drop him on the other side of the mountain. Once you've done that, you can heal him up and start training him. Ross joins as a level 1 journeyman with, I gotta be honest here, absolutely horrendous bases. He's got 15 HP, 5 strength, 2 skill, 3 speed, 8 luck, 3 defense, 0 resistance, and 4 move. Even though it's early in the game, Ross's stats are terrible at this point in time. He has the brilliant combination of all of your unit's weak stats. He has the same defense as Erica, the same strength as Vanessa, his speed and movement are the same as Gilliam's, and his HP, skill, and resistance are worse than literally anyone on your team. His constitution isn't the worst on his team, but a basic Iron Axe still weighs him down by 2, which leaves him at 1 attack speed. There are upsides to Ross, but you won't find them in his base stats. Now, the idea of a character like Ross is obviously not one of a character with a strong start, but rather a promise of high potential. Journeyman is not a normal class but a trainee one, meaning it's one tier below the one most of your other units start in. Once he's gained 10 levels, he can promote into a normal class like Pirate or Fighter. The idea of a character that starts weaker but needs a lot of training is not new to Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem 1 had a character called Est, a Pegasus Knight that joins late in the game with a low level and low base stats but higher growth rates. I don't think Ross really fits into this archetype, considering there are so many differences between him and Est, but they have similar ideas behind them. They are there for players who like training units from 0 to hero. Unlike Est, however, Ross does not have spectacular growth rates at all. In fact, they're actually kind of bad, especially by Sacred Stone standards. He's got 70% HP, 50% strength, 35% skill, 30% speed, 40% luck, 25% defense, and 20% resistance. Compare them to a totally random other character, say Garcia. He only beats his dad by 10% in speed and 5% in resistance, and Garcia even has leads in HP, strength, and skill that I think are at least as impactful. Now, here's where the stats get interesting. Fans of trainee units will often say that units like Ross compensate for lack of bases and growth through the 9 extra level ups that they have to gain, as well as their promotion bonuses. While technically it is true that Ross, Emilia, and Ewan have more room to grow and an extra promotion bonus, I think the impacts of those perks are overrated and part of a big misconception. For one, units generally do not level all the way to 2020 before the end of the game, unless you grind them up in the Tower of Valny. There just isn't enough experience available unless you're only using like 1 or 2 units. If you do grind on a world map or in the tower, well, that's a whole other can of worms. If you enjoy grinding, be my guest, but I find that grinding up units trivializes the game and minimizes the difference between units, so I don't take it into account when rating characters. So Ross doesn't really have 9 extra levels to work with over units. He probably still gets a few more than other units because his early levels come with accelerated EXP gain, but not as much as you'd think because it's much harder to get EXP with a unit that has such poor offense, durability, and mobility. Someone like Franz can gain 50 XP over the course of a turn if he fights 2 enemies and kills 1, which is easier to do with him because he moves further, hits harder, and survives on the front lines. As for Ross's extra promotion bonus, it's there, but it's pretty small. It's plus 2 HP, plus 2 strength, and then depending on his promotion choice, it's either plus 1 in skill and resistance, or plus 1 in speed and defense. And his constitution is brought up to 10 or 11, which is enough for using Iron Axes without a speed penalty, but still gets him weighed down a bit by anything heavier, like a hand axe. This is less of a promotion bonus and more just bringing him in level with your basic fighter or pirate bases. Ross's base stats were already tons and tons worse than other units, as I've illustrated, and these minor bonuses definitely don't make up for it. What's usually missing in a debate like this is the whole picture. You've got one side saying Ross has 9 extra levels and he promotes twice, and the other side saying other units have better bases, his promotion isn't that good and he gets less levels than that. You can't really come to a conclusion to this if we don't look at what this all means in practice, so I'm going to try to show that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare Ross to a similar unit. Normally, I don't really do class by class comparisons because that kind of suggests you should use exactly one unit of each class, but in this case, it's going to make statistical comparisons easier since the units will use similar weapons and be in similar situations. So the unit I'm going to compare Ross to is, of course, Garcia. Not just at the start or just at the end, but in between as well. It should be no surprise that when they first join, Garcia is completely dwarfing Ross. Garcia has almost double of Ross's HP, 3 more strength, 5 more skill, 4 more speed, 2 more defense, and even 1 more resistance, not to mention a point of movement. The only lead Ross has is in luck, but Garcia has enough luck not to face a crit chance from most enemies. That plus 5 avoid and plus 2.5 hit that Ross gets from his luck lead is more than beaten by the plus 8 avoid Garcia gets from higher speed and the plus 10 hit he gets from having higher skill. Garcia also has a massive 6 constitution lead, so he can use iron and hand axes unimpeded. If Ross wants to sustain his magnificent 3 speed, he needs to use his hatchet, which makes his attacking power an absolute joke. He has 9 base attack with it. If this were 3 houses and you could punch people in the face, Garcia could probably do that much damage with his bare fists. Looking at it right now, this is like a tidal wave drowning an ant. Now, you might contest that this is not fair, because I'm comparing them before Ross has had the chance to get any training, but the fact is that this is a point in the game where Garcia wins big time. In order to train Ross, I have to work with these atrocious base stats. Now, I should note that working around flaws of units with stats like this is not particularly difficult, but rather it's tedious and time consuming. I sometimes enjoy training units with low bases like this, because it's fun to see them grow. It's nice to see hard work pay off. Units like Nino, Est, Kurthnaga, etc., they have a certain charm to them, but compared to units who don't have to deal with low bases, they are at a disadvantage. Ross has to be constantly protected from enemies since he can barely survive 1 round, so the other units are limited in what they can do since they have to babysit Ross. And if you want to get Ross a kill, you usually have to be very specific about what characters and weapons you can use, since Ross's attacking power is so low. Generally, enemies don't end up at low enough HP for Ross to finish off naturally, and sometimes they'll be at a point where anyone but Ross can finish them off. Ross can still get some good EXP just from chipping an enemy, but he's not going to make it to level 10 anytime soon if he doesn't get a couple of kills here and there. But when he does make it to level 10, you are rewarded for your patience, as Ross gets his first promotion. You can see his stats are looking a lot more like a real unit now, though they're not exactly stellar, with the exception of his high strength, which can be expected to be around 11 or 12. But his HP, skill, speed and defense are all still pretty lackluster. Sure, that's to be expected of a level 1 unit at this point in the game, but that doesn't make him do any better in combat. Enemies don't exactly go, actually Ross, normally I would kill you here, but since you're just a level 1 unit, I'm gonna go ahead and let you live. Comparing him to Garcia again for a moment, if we assume that Garcia has gained a modest 3 levels in the time it took for Ross to get to 10, you'll notice that Ross is not really outshining his dad here. Ross has slightly higher strength and a significant advantage in luck, but in every other area, Garcia is either about equal, or in the case of HP, is actually beating him. Garcia's leads in speed and constitution are also very much worth noting still. And this is when Ross's advantage should, in theory, be at its biggest. He's had his 9 extra levels, the really fast ones, and he's had his extra promotion bonus, but he's still looking pretty mediocre, next to a unit that's never really considered to be that great to begin with. So let's continue our road down Ross's promotion paths, because there's one I've left completely untouched so far. There's a third, secret path if you complete the game on both Erica and Ephraim routes, where you can promote Ross into a journeyman, again, and then into either a hero or another journeyman. This last promoted journeyman is also known as the super trainee. It's really funny to watch Ross stay tiny as his stats get bigger and bigger, but unfortunately it comes with the drawback of no constitution bonus upon promotion. So that means Ross will forever be weighed down by every axe other than his own hatchet. And speed is a stat that Ross needs the most. The class really offers absolutely no gameplay advantage, unfortunately. And other than a lack of a constitution boost, the promotional gains are actually the exact same as heroes. That leaves us with the main paths, the ones that go through fighter and pirate. When deciding what to promote Ross into, the most important stat to look at is his speed, because that's a stat that can make or break him. A Ross that doubles will usually kill the enemy, because his attack power is high enough to kill just about anything, but it's not quite high enough for one-shots, so doubling is a really big deal for him. For this reason, the Warrior is Ross's worst final class, since the Warrior promotion bonus from either path gives him 0 speed. It doesn't help that Warrior offers nothing great to compensate for this flaw. An E rank in bows doesn't help Ross in any way, and nothing else really stands out about the Warrior. Kinda sad, because if you listen to Ross in the story, a Warrior is all he wants to be. And of course the same applies for Garcia, since he has exactly this choice to make when he promotes. So for Ross, it's really between Pirate into Berserker or Fighter into Hero for his best class. Most players prefer the Berserker path, and it's easy to see why. First of all, it's a pretty unique and uncommon class with some novel attributes. Pirate and Berserker can walk on very rough terrain other units cannot cross, and the Berserker has that fun crit bonus that will let Ross just crit something to death. Berserker also just seems to fit Ross's stat layout better. His main selling point is his high strength, whereas heroes are usually more speedy and if anything, balanced rather than lopsided. But stereotyping a character's class choice based on what fits their archetype the best is a pitfall. It shouldn't matter what general class attributes Ross's stats look like. What should matter the most is what makes Ross the best character he could possibly be. If Ross's stats don't conform to the stereotypes of the class he turns into, but he kicks all sorts of ass, why would it matter? And in reverse, if Ross's stats fit a class stereotype to a T, but he performs very poorly in it, then why would that be a good thing? Constitution-wise, Ross gets a total of +5 from Berserker, getting him up to 13 con, whereas as a hero, he only gets +3, only letting him reach 11. That means they can both use Iron and Killer Axes without losing speed, but Berserker actually has a speed advantage of 1 when using a hand axe. Hero has access to an extra weapon type in swords, while mercenaries like Raven and Gear get a lot of mileage out of gaining axes after promotion, mostly due to gaining 1-2 range. Ross and Garcia really don't need swords a whole lot. Most of the time they will prefer using an axe, unless they're looking to gain weapon triangle advantage over enemy axe users. The relative lack of a use for swords make the advantages of the Berserker path all the more interesting. As a pirate, Ross can walk on rivers and oceans. This path is the reason that Ross is used even at the highest level of FE8 play. He can be used in Chapter 7 to walk the river that goes down the middle, and rescue drops from other units there. And in my FE8 100% growth run, I had to train Ross pretty much entirely for Chapter 13, where he was used to walk across the river into Selena's area, where he could kill her and the enemies nearby, helping me route the chapter within 2 turns. Berserker Ross can also walk on peaks, which can be interesting in a chapter like Chapter 12 Erica route, but otherwise doesn't have a whole lot of applications. When Ross is on a peak, he gains 40% Avoid, which makes him practically invincible, but of course any grounded enemy he fights on there gets the same bonus, so it's a bit of a double-edged sword. And of course Berserker has that juicy 15% crit bonus. I think for most newer players, the combination of enormous damage and the hilarious critical animation is what makes them like him so much. If we didn't have fun little things like that, we probably wouldn't enjoy these games as much as we do, but from a utility standpoint, for a unit with attack power as high as Ross's, the extra damage from a critical hit is generally overkill. If he doubles something, it'll usually die regardless. But it does give him a higher chance to kill the things he doesn't double, and it can also compensate for the badly timed misses. Overall, I would say Berserker is the better choice for Ross, but if for some reason you don't want to make him one, then Hero is almost as good. Garcia of course does not have the option of going Berserker, but Hero is still miles and miles better than Warrior for him. There is one minor thing that people sometimes bring up against the Hero class for Ross and Garcia, and that's the lower strength cap. Warrior and Berserker have a massive 30 strength cap, the highest in the game, while Hero caps out at 25. A gap of 5 strength is pretty big, and the high strength is the main selling point of units like Ross and Garcia, so why would I advocate handicapping them like that? The reason I pretty much ignore the strength cap on Ross and Garcia is because it pretty much never comes up during the game unless you level grind them. Even when leveled up to 20 before promoting, Ross and Garcia on average do not reach that 25 strength cap until the level 10 promoted. By the time you reach that level, the game is basically over, and the extra strength is really just for show, unless you're looking to play the post game or the Link Arena. And the extra strength that they could get above 25 is pretty much overkill anyway. At this point in the game, you have access to some really high level weapons, including the legendary Garm, and they're capable of 1-hit KOing or at least 2-hit KOing just about everything. And a few things that they do not kill in one round will probably survive a shot from 30 strength anyway. And keep in mind, we're not talking about a free +5 strength that lasts for a significant amount of time. We're talking about a potential +5 strength at the very end of their career. Ross isn't even guaranteed to reach it. He has a 42% chance of not capping his strength when he maxes out his level, while Garcia has a 20% chance to never reach his strength cap. But that speed advantage that they get as heroes, they have it from the moment they promote until the end of the game. It's 100% guaranteed, and I argue it helps them way more than an extra dose of strength anyway. So let's do one final comparison at promotion time to show how they're doing in the mid to late game. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to assume that both characters are leveled up to 20 before they're promoted, since that makes them very easy to compare using this handy website. but I generally recommend you promote them as soon as you find that their XP gains are dipping, which tends to be around level 15. Now if you do that, you might experience a very tiny little bit of long-term stat loss, but on the other hand, you will be able to access the advantages of promoting much sooner, which in Raz's case includes plus 4 HP, plus 1 strength, plus 1 skill, plus 1 speed, plus 2 defense, plus 2 resistance, plus 3 constitution, and an extra point of movement. He will also get an S rank in Axes sooner, and this will grant him plus 5% hit and crit, as well as the ability to use the Garm, which is an axe that gives him enormous might as well as plus 5 speed. His mobility is further increased by the aforementioned ability to walk on peaks. Anyway, let's take a look at the numbers. Level 1 Hero Garcia has around 45 HP, 19 strength, 15 to 16 skill, 12 speed, 11 defense, 5 to 6 resistance, and 9 to 10 luck. Meanwhile, Berserker Ross has around 40 to 41 HP, 20 to 21 strength, 13 skill, 13 to 14 speed, 13 defense, 7 to 8 resistance, and 20 luck. As you can see, a lot of their stats are rather close to each other, within a couple of points. Garcia has small wins in HP and skill, while Ross has tiny wins in strength, speed, defense, resistance, and he also has a pretty big luck lead. When you combine these statistical advantages with the natural class boons of a Berserker, I think it's fair to say that Ross has surpassed his father at this point. But I think it's also fair to say that this is a relatively small win for Ross. Let's look back at that first comparison, where Garcia was completely blowing Ross out of the water. That was a decisive win for Garcia, and even after Ross is promoted to Pirate, I would say Garcia was winning by about as much back then as Ross is winning over him right now. And this comparison doesn't really get better for Ross if we compare them at a higher level instead, because Ross doesn't really have a growth advantage over his dad. As I've shown at the start, it's Ross's 10% speed and 5% res against Garcia's 10% HP, 50% strength, and 5% skill. Pretty small difference. And in this last comparison, I've been generous enough to completely erase the 14 level lead that Garcia enjoys over Ross. If you give him an equal amount of kills, Garcia will always be ahead of him. His lead will become smaller over time due to the way the XP formula works as you level up, but it will never truly close, so the stat gaps should really be even smaller than what they look like right now. If after all that, Ross only comes out with a couple of extra stat points here and there, then is Ross really worth using over Garcia if you can get almost the same thing with much less effort? Wouldn't you rather have a unit that requires no babying, just a regular fighter around the level of the rest of your team, capable of holding his own for the entire game? Of course, the answer to this is that it's totally worth it if Ross is the type of character you enjoy using, the zero to hero kind of guy. The payoff to using him isn't just a statistical result of doing so. I think most people using Ross do it because the effort put into it is part of the reward. The part at the end of the road, where Ross is killing things left and right, is satisfying because he starts off barely capable of defending himself. It's the idea of hard work paying off that players like, and that's cool. Like I said, I enjoy doing it myself sometimes, but if you ask me if this makes him good, if you ask me to put Ross on a tier list, perhaps relative to another unit like Garcia, I'll have to be honest and say that the numbers don't lie. He is objectively pretty mediocre. Now, to be clear here, once you've gotten through Ross's bad start, I don't actually think he's that bad. He doesn't double consistently, but there are plenty of enemies that he can double, and his attack power is really good. As a Berserker, he has a high critical rate, and he can reach some places that other units have trouble getting to. His durability is fine. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible either, and he has access to 1-2 range. He's not the killer machine that newer players often see him as, but he's not unsalvageable. What makes Ross so interesting to me is the water walk ability, because through this ability alone, he makes himself useful in low turn count runs, despite everything else about him. Water walking is that one thing that he can do that Garcia and almost every other unit cannot, and because of that, he sees used in a context that generally all but prohibits this type of unit. And that's really all I got to say about Ross, but man, there really is a lot to unpack when it comes to Ross and trainees in general. If there's another unit you'd like me to take a look at, drop them down in the comments below, and maybe yours will be the next waifu. In closing, I'd like to say a big thanks to my designer Rin for the thumbnail, thanks to Dr. Anime for proofreading the script, and of course my new video editor Raccoon Man for helping me get this video out and making it look this pretty. And last but not least, thanks to you for watching. Have a good day, and I will see you next time. Peace.